Nobody in the kingdom of Vernus slept the night the bells rang out of turn. Bells were meant for coronations, for weddings, for the birth of an heir. They were not meant for the hour past midnight, when the whole of Harrowmere lay dark and the only light came from the high windows of the palace, burning gold against a starless sky. Yet the bells rang anyway, slow, heavy, deliberate, and every soul who heard them sat up in bed and understood, without a single word being spoken, that something had gone terribly wrong at the heart of the crown. King Aldric IV had ruled Vernus for 31 years. He was not a young man anymore, and everyone knew it, but he had always carried his age the way an old oak carries its years, bent a little, weathered, but unshaken by any storm. He rose before his servants. He walked the frost-covered gardens each morning with his hands clasped behind his back. He read every letter sent to him by the common people, even the ones that scolded him. To the kingdom, he was less a ruler than a fixed point in the sky, the thing you steered by without ever thinking to question whether it might one day fall. That was why the bells frightened them so. Inside the palace, in a chamber warmed by a fire that no one had thought to tend, Crown Prince Edmund stood at his father's bedside and refused to let go of the old man's hand. He was a tall man of 40, broad in the shoulder, with the same gray eyes his father had passed down to him. For most of his life he had waited to become king, the way all heirs wait, half in dread and half in a shame they never speak aloud. Now that the moment pressed close against him, he found he wanted none of it. He would have given the whole kingdom, every acre of it, to have one more ordinary morning walking the gardens beside the man in the bed. Across from him stood his sister, Princess Rowena. She had ridden through the night to reach the palace. Mud still clung to the hem of her traveling cloak, and her dark hair had come loose from its pins, but no one had dared suggest she stop to change. Rowena was not a woman you suggested things to. She was younger than Edmund by 3 years and harder than him by a measure no one could name. Where her brother felt his grief and let it soften him, Rowena felt hers and let it sharpen her into something with an edge. She stood very straight at the foot of the bed and watched her father breathe, counting the seconds between each rise of his chest, as though she could hold him in the world by sheer force of attention. The royal physician, an old and careful man named Master Corwin, had told them the truth an hour before, and he had told it plainly because he knew they would accept nothing less. The king's heart was failing. It had been failing quietly for months, he admitted, and the king had sworn him to silence, unwilling to frighten the kingdom or burden his children while there was still work to be done. Now the silence was over. There were days left, perhaps, not weeks. "Why did he not tell us?" Edmund had said. It had not come out as a question, it had come out as a wound. Corwin had no answer that would ease it, so he offered none. Now in the small hours the three of them kept their watch. The fire burned low. Somewhere far below, the palace stirred as word spread from servant to servant, guard to guard, the news moving through the great stone halls like water finding every crack. By dawn the whole capital would know. By the following night the whole kingdom would. And the question that would rise in every heart, from the highest lord to the poorest fishwife on the northern coast, would be the same question that now hung unspoken in the king's chamber. What happens to us when he is gone? King Aldric stirred. His eyes, when they opened, were clouded but aware, and they found his children with the ease of long love. He tried to speak and managed only a breath. Rowena was at his side in an instant, kneeling, bringing her ear close to his lips. Edmund leaned in on the other side. For a long moment their father gathered himself, and the effort it cost him was terrible to watch, and then the words came, thin as thread but clear. "Do not weep for me yet," he said. "I am not finished." It was so like him, so stubborn, so gently mocking of their fear, that Edmund laughed even as his eyes filled. Rowena did not laugh. She pressed her father's hand to her cheek and held it there and said nothing at all because she did not trust her voice to hold. "There is a thing I must tell you both," the king went on, each word paid for dearly. "A thing I should have told you years ago. I was a coward about it, and cowardice is a poor gift to leave one's children, so I will not leave it. Listen to me now while I have the breath." They listened. What the king told them, in that slow and halting hour before the sun rose over Harrowmere, changed everything they thought they understood about their family and their crown. 30 years before, when Edmund was a boy of 10 and Rowena a child of 7, there had been a third child. A daughter born between them in the count of years, a girl named Lysa. Neither Edmund nor Rowena remembered her, and now the king told them why. Lysa had been born with a weakness in her lungs, and the physicians of that age had believed she would not live past her first winter. Frightened for her, and advised by counselors who feared the political weakness of a sickly royal child, the king had made a decision he had regretted every day of his life since. He had sent the girl away, quietly, secretly, to be raised in the healthful mountain air of the eastern provinces by a family sworn to protect her, with no knowledge of who she truly was. "I told myself it was for her sake," the king whispered, "that the mountains would heal her where the palace never could, and they did heal her. She lived. My spies told me she grew strong, she grew tall, but I never brought her home. Year after year I told myself the next spring and the next, and I never did, because to bring her home was to admit what I had done, to admit that I had given away my own child out of fear." Edmund had gone very still. Rowena had risen slowly to her feet. "She lives," Rowena said. Her voice came out strange and flat. "We have a sister, and she lives, and you never." "She lives," the king said, "or she did 6 months ago when last my man returned from the east. She keeps a horse farm above the town of Callant. She has no notion of who she is, and she is owed the truth, and she is owed her name, and I have not the days left to give her either." His clouded eyes moved from Rowena to Edmund and back. "So I give the task to you, both of you. Find your sister. Tell her who she is. And do not let her think for one moment that she was ever unwanted. She was only ever loved by a father too afraid to prove it." The fire cracked. Outside, the first gray hint of morning touched the high windows. For a long time, neither of them could speak. It was Edmund who found his voice first, and when he did, it was not anger in it, though he had every right to anger. It was something quieter and more difficult. "We will find her," he said. "I promise you we will bring her home." Rowena said nothing. She had turned away to face the window, her back very straight, her hands closed into fists at her sides. Inside her a war was being fought that no one else could see between the fury of a woman who had been lied to her whole life, and the grief of a daughter about to lose her father, and beneath both of these, surfacing slowly like something rising from deep water, a strange and unfamiliar thing. Curiosity, longing. The sudden, staggering knowledge that somewhere to the east there was a woman with her father's gray eyes, riding horses across a mountain meadow, entirely unaware that a family was breaking apart in a palace she had never seen. "A sister." When Rowena finally turned back to the bed, the anger had not left her, but it had made room for something else. She knelt again and took her father's hand. "I am still furious with you," she told him. The old king smiled a real smile, the first in that long dark night. "Good," he breathed. "Then you have not stopped being my daughter. And Rowena, I have always loved you the more for your anger. It was never cruelty in you. It was only that you cared too fiercely to hide it." She bent her head. When she spoke again, the flatness had gone out of her voice, and what remained was raw. "We will find her, father, and I will be furious with you the whole way there, every mile of it." "I would expect nothing less," the king said, and closed his eyes and rested. He did not die that night, as they had feared he might. The stubbornness that had carried him through 31 years of rule carried him a while longer. But everyone in the palace understood that the king was living now on borrowed time, and that the borrowing could not last. And so, in the days that followed, an announcement went out from the crown, the very announcement that the ringing bells had foretold, though the kingdom had feared far worse from them. The king was gravely ill. Crown Prince Edmund and Princess Rowena, it was said, would depart the capital together on a journey of the greatest personal importance to His Majesty, and would return before the season turned. The nature of the journey was not disclosed. The kingdom, which loved its royal family and feared for its king, waited and watched and prayed, and did not know, could not know, that the 2 riders who left Harrowmere at dawn 3 days later were riding east to bring home a sister who did not yet know she was lost. They rode hard through the lowland farms and the yellow autumn fields, past villages where the people came out to their doorways to watch the royal party pass, sensing without being told that something rare was underway. They climbed into the hills as the air grew thin and cold and clean. And on the 9th day of riding, with the mountains rising blue and enormous around them, they came at last to the town of Callant, and to a horse farm above it, where a tall woman with dark hair and gray eyes was leading a young mare in from the paddock as the evening came down. She stopped when she saw the riders. She shaded her eyes against the low sun. She could not have known who they were, or why they had come, or what news they carried down out of the west. She only knew that 2 strangers of obvious rank had ridden a very long way to reach her small farm at the edge of the world, and that the taller of the two, a broad-shouldered man with familiar gray eyes, had dismounted and was walking toward her with tears already standing in his eyes and both his hands held out, open and empty, the way a person reaches for something they have wanted their whole life without knowing its name. "I am sorry," Edmund said, and his voice broke on it. "I am so sorry it took us so long to come." The woman looked at him. She looked at the princess dismounting behind him, at the royal colors, at the gray eyes that were so exactly her own. And though she did not understand, not yet, something in her went very still, the way the whole kingdom had gone still the night the bells rang out of turn. The stillness of a life about to change past all returning. "Who are you?" she asked. And Rowena, stepping forward, muddy and travel-worn and furious and hoping all at once, gave her the only answer that mattered. "We're your family," she said, "and our father is waiting for you to come home." They did not speak of illness in that first hour, nor of crowns, nor of the years that had been stolen. All of that would come. There would be a long ride west and a hard reckoning, and a meeting between a dying father and the daughter he had wronged, and no one could yet say how that meeting would go. But standing in the last gold light of that mountain evening, three gray-eyed strangers who were not strangers at all found the beginning of something, and held on to it, and did not let go. Far to the west, in a palace by the gray sea, an old king waited. He had asked to be moved to the window so that he might watch the eastern road. And each morning his servants moved him there, and each morning he watched, and each morning he told them in a voice growing fainter but never once wavering in its hope that his children were coming home. All three of them, at last. He meant to live to see it, and in the end, though that is a story for another telling, the old oak held on just long enough.